Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Selfish Truth. I'm Niels Hansen. I'm going to be talking about the Ukrainian crisis that's going on right now, particularly the involvement of Russia, in Crimea, the island. I think it's on the southeastern section there, which has a high Russian population there. I'm going to be talking about this, and I know many of you have been asking me to cover this on Twitter, like quite a while ago. This whole conflict has been going on since November, likely well before November of 2013. It's just, it hit the media and everything like that in November because of Ukrainian, thinking about signing into the European Union and then backtracking and then blah, 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 and then it all erupted. So I'm going to go over a lot of things. This is probably going to be a long video. And I'm going to say this up front, and this is very, very important. Remember, this is just my opinion. I'm a Canadian, so first of all, let's put that out there, because I always see someone like, not that I think it's at all bad to be American. I love America. I love the United States. I have, friends that live there. My best friend, Chris, or Meatwagon, lives there. I love visiting there as well. But I also love Canada. So I'm not bashing the United States in this, but please don't say, oh, you're a typical American, because you're just going to look like an ignorant dumbass. At least do some research. So let's just get that out of the way. And remember, this is just my opinion. Just like you have your opinion. And this is the way I look at it. As a person of, I'm not political, I'm not over there, I'm not a correspondent, I'm not high up, I'm not privy to special information other than, like you, what I see and read online or in other media sources. So I have the same information. I just try and look at it from different angles because I usually question the angle that I originally see it, because that's usually, manipulated from our sources. So I don't have any information. It's just my opinion. And at the same time, I acknowledge the fact that my own opinion, just like yours, is probably, manipulated. Even though, and I read this all the time, I see this all the time, before I even get into it, I gotta set this up because this shit bothers me whenever I see this. And this happens on the internet. And I don't care. You form, people's like, oh no, I have my own opinion. I form it. People, like I was going on about how politicians and corporations use propaganda to manipulate people's opinions, and that really our opinions aren't really our own. They're predictable. As predictable as the sun comes up in the morning, our opinions, although we feel like we form them on our own, are formed based on misinformation, on manipulated information from the sources. So, and they're meant to make you feel like you're making the decision, but you're making a decision based on information fed to you and clean and buffered. So it's like here, fragments here. It's like, that's how propaganda works. That's why corporations make billions of dollars in making you buy things that you don't fucking need. It's how politicians sing you the sweetest song and lull you into, voting for them. They're going to make a change, and when they get in there, changes rarely ever come. But you were manipulated, you believed in it, and blah, 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 and you made your choice. But you made your choice based on this misinformation. So don't think that your opinion, even though mine is likely going to be very different from yours, is the right one. Because you, and all of you out there, believe me, no politicians watching this, same with mine, who knows who's right. We believe that we've made the right decision because we see all this information. And I don't form opinions to be the devil's advocate. I don't do it like, oh, everyone's agreeing this, well, I'm going to take this position. You know what I mean? I don't do it. I don't want to cause an argument. I just step back. I get that. I get the same feeling that you do. When I see these things, I react. I guarantee you I react the same way. I'm like, they can't do that. That's good, and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, whoa. What's going on here? So I dug and I waited for a long time before I did this video. I wanted to make sure that I read as much as I can, and I wanted to sit back and kind of look at this and say, what's going on here? Is this right? Are we being fed information? And here's my position on this. I actually side with Russia. And I'm not, as I said, I'm not doing this to go against it. I mean, I love the United States. I'm a Canadian. I served in the military for 3 years. I love our democracy, our system. It's a parliamentary democracy, I believe what it is. Elected officials, blah, blah, blah. Well, I live in a Western democratic world. But that doesn't mean that I'm blinded by information fed to us. And obviously, it's expected that most of us will side with with that information, with that, the overthrowing of the government. Oh, they were going to sign with Russia. They were going to do that. They were pulling out of Europe, and they have a right to. It's the democracy. I'm going to get into this because this actually really bothered me. And at first, I'm going to tell you right now, I was siding with them. I'm like, yeah, you know what? They can't do that. There's something shady going on with those high up political officials, that one side of the government in Ukraine. And guess what? You think that your politicians in any country that you live in are not corrupted? I'm not saying that every single one of them are, but if you believe that they're all clean and no one's doing anything shady, you are living in a fucking dream world. There's no point in even talking about this. Click off this video because go watch something, whatever, mindless, because you're already a sheep. And there's conversation shouldn't even exist. You're just gonna get all riled up because there's no changing your mind. You've already made it, and that's it. But just listen to me for a little bit here, and I'm just sharing my opinion. I'm not gonna change you. You've got yours. If you disagree, that's fine. Because at this point here, based on everything that I've read, you're not going to change my mind. You don't have any information that I don't have. I don't care, and I don't care if you're going to say, well, my family's from Ukraine. Guess what? I'm from Canada. And even if something was happening here and I was reporting on it, and I think I had an understanding of it, if it's high up in the government and things that are happening like that, chances are I don't even know what's going on. Just because you're from the country doesn't mean that you have any more information. You're still just a general person, and the 1 or 2%, the puppeteers control everything. You don't have any more. It doesn't matter that you're living here or anywhere else. I don't care if you're a Ukrainian person, unless you're a high up politician and you're reporting to me. It doesn't matter where you are or who you are. That, I'm telling you, is a fact. It's a fact. So this whole thing erupted, and this is where, at first I was like, okay, yeah, you know what, they want to join. Why are they doing this? It seems like the government pulled back. They were going to sign with the European Union, then they were like, no, and Russia was like, we're not going to honor this, and we're going to demand, and we're going to put sanctions on this. I look at it as an economic move. It's almost like putting sanctions against things, other countries, and doing stuff like that. And guess what? Every country, all these countries do this. The United States does it. All European nations. If some country does something and they're siding with something that they don't like, oh, the sanctions come out. Oh, we'll do this and we'll cut this off. Granted, it's normally for some atrocity of life, but we do it. And Russia, without waging war on them, they're like, okay, that's fine, you can sign that. They weren't saying we're going to come in and invade and take over your country. We're like, fine, then we're not going to uphold this. We're going to sanction this. They politically strong-armed the country. Politically, not through military force or anything like that. And here's the thing. The government that was in power, granted, maybe the people in Kiev or whatever wanted to side with, there's this clear division. There's the eastern side that are very pro-Russian. A lot of Russian citizens or whatever, yeah, sure, they're Ukrainian, but they're Russian descent, and they still have ties to that. They're still, proud to be Ukrainian. There's nothing wrong with that. And then, but still saying, oh, you know what, well, we acknowledge where we come from, and we don't have any ill will towards the Russians. We actually like the Russians. And then you have the other half, and maybe it's slightly above that are pro-Europe. They don't want anything. And granted, everything that we're reading, again, I'm just privy to the same information, is that they're young. They're younger, and again, very emotional, which is exactly why I see Molotov cocktails and just violence erupt. And granted, the government reacted poorly. I'm not saying that they did everything they were right. They were right to do so. But the whole thing, let's face it, when a mob gets a hold of things like that, when the mob starts, getting in, and whether it's a peaceful protest, there's no such thing as a peaceful protest in these things. You start cursing and you start getting aggressive. They're angry. And granted, they can be angry. The second that I love this saying, and I don't know if it's a cliche at this point here, but the person who throws the first punch lost the argument. And I absolutely uphold that statement there. It basically says if you're in an argument or a discussion with someone and you're debating back and forth, the person who throws the first punch basically lost because they're no longer able to have a discussion. They've run out of intelligent things to say. They no longer converse on an intellectual level, so they're getting aggressive, they get angry, and they throw a punch because they're all offended. They lack the mental capacity to discuss things on a rational basis. So when I see something like that, it angers me. Now here's the problem. the eruption and the violence and everything and the overthrowing, and I completely agree with the Russian government in calling this a coup, an unconstitutional coup. I absolutely agree with it. And believe me, we're being fed all this information from the Western side. But when I look at this, they say, oh no, they're doing this and we don't want this and blah, blah, blah. 50% of you want it, maybe over that amount, you know, like slightly. I think there's slightly over 50%. Which means that the other people, the other voices that are pro-Russian, who are citizens of the Ukraine, their voices are not heard. Kiev isn't actually in the western side. So the government, where the government presides, is dominated by this Western world. But that's just because where you live doesn't mean you echo the voices of everyone else. The reason why that government was elected in, democratically elected in, okay, by the majority. When they make a decision like that, they weren't cutting off food and water. I could see a revolution happening because of, oh, they're starving us and they're doing this. It was a change in siding. They didn't feel, you know, whatever. Yeah, maybe they were manipulated by the Russian government. Maybe that was what we were told. Maybe there was actually real reasons. You know, why they said, oh, wait, we're not going to go with the European Union. You think that, you know, here's the other thing. You think that simply joining the European Union is going to fix everything? Really? Why don't you ask Greece if it fixed it? Why don't you ask people in Ireland how they feel about it? I know that's the euro and it's the financial aspect is actually different from the European Union. But just simply joining in the Western culture, you think that fixes everything? These people, I'm sorry, but in the Ukrainian, the way that it erupts and in terms of you know, even if you look this up, if you look it up on Wikipedia, I think democracy, look up democracy. I know it's Wikipedia, it's just information. But if you look it up, you look at how they're set up democratically. You'll see countries that are not democratic, you'll see countries that are like fully elected democracy, and they rate them. Ukraine is not there. There's you know, eruptions. You want to fully uphold the Western idea and become part of the European culture, then you need to understand how democracy works. It doesn't mean that every time the government makes a decision that you bring your pitchforks and bottles of Molotov, you know, explosive, and burn buildings down. That's not democracy, and you do not represent the majority of the people. If you want to have, you know, here we have online petitions and we do the same thing, but we're not burning down the White House, you know, of people in the United States, or we're not going to Ottawa and torching everything. Like, it's ridiculous. You are not representing. That is not a non-democratic move. That is a chunk, a good chunk, and likely a 50% plus chunk of people trying to oust the government. But maybe, and I'm thinking this is a strong possibility, that opposition, think about it. So people are just getting there and they're you know, resisting. We know this. People can be manipulated. I don't care where you are in the world. I look at the general population of any country in the entire planet as sheep. That's why there's a sheep on my actual page. Selfish truth. We hear and we believe and we read what we want to read to fit this idea and this vision that we have of the world or of this particular subject. And that's it. And that's why I feel it's sheepish, you know, the selfish truth. It's selfish for you. You read and you do what you need, and you convey information that's good for your position. It's a little insight there. What was I even saying? But I mean, you want to side with that. I'm sorry, but as in the Western world, if I was part of Europe, I'm sorry, but you're not ready to become part of it. Every time someone makes a decision, you're just going to erupt like that. Maybe put it to vote. And then I read an article too from the Ukraine. It was an online Ukrainian thing and it was translated. And they're like, you know, the Western world and blah, blah, blah. And because there's other people actually that I believe that must see it my way, because they're defending this. And they're saying, oh, well, it's only 50% and it's not, you know, they're saying that it's 50-50 and we didn't have a right to oust the government, because they're getting chastised. There are people, their voices are very low, and there's people like me that go against the grain. And remember, I'm not doing this to be your enemy. You don't live, most of you people watching this are not from the Ukraine. So you're getting all upset about it like because it's your idea and it's your opinion, you need to get the fuck over it. That's plain and simple. That's the way it is. This isn't you, we're having a discussion here, don't get all emotional over it. I know I just said drop the F-bomb, but I'm not mad about it. I turn around and I'm gonna go play some Plants vs. Zombies, you know? But I'm not insensitive to it either. I can't uphold it. And I'm gonna get into the Russian involvement in just a second here. I go a long way, the long-winded way about it. But I don't think that that's a democratic way. This article talks about the fact that, oh, well, they're saying that it's 50% this, and we didn't take into consideration it wasn't pure democracy when we overthrew the government, blah, blah, blah. And it's not like that because most of us now, those numbers are not reflective of most of us. Most of us actually wanted them out. Really? Because the voting, the statistics, the recorded statistics of actually the voices, the real voices of the country based on ballots and everything like that, which, yes, I know they can be manipulated, but at least it's something a little more concrete than oh, well, most of us now. Really? Where's the statistics? Where are you getting most of us now? Is it because of the number of fires and the pitchforks that you're holding there? Well, most of you may be in Kiev, which is on the western side, yeah. I see that, but you don't represent the voices of the East, the ones that are pro-Russian. And so the pro-Russians, wanted it. Did you see them going into Kiev and throwing Molotov cocktails and burning buildings down because the government was about to sign and side with Europe? Meanwhile, half of the country wanted Russia. Did you see them do that? No. No, you didn't. And it's this youthful reaction, emotional jerk reactions that causes these stupid reactions to happen and volatile, and it's a coup. I believe it is a coup. And the opposition whispering, oh, they can't do that. They can't do this. There's people in there. If you think that none of this information, you could get the crowd riled up. Just make people feel like their rights and everything are being violated. They can't do that. They're one-siding it. It's corruption. There's corruption. The next thing you know, corruption. Oh, they're doing this. They're going to attack. Boom. Next thing you know, there's chaos. Fueled by the opposition, manipulated like sheep, the same thing. And then you hear, I read an article quickly, I think it was on CNN or whatever, about Kerry talking about, we'll stand for the people of Ukraine. We will stand. Well, which people are you standing for? Because half the country, based on those electoral actual results, half the country, you're not standing up for it. So are you standing up just for the people that overthrew the government, the ones that wanted the change, versus the other half of the country that didn't mind and would prefer to actually work with Russia? So you're standing on that, and that's the right decision because they want to become part of us? Oh, they want to be on our team. We're going to protect them, and we're going to stand up for them. But you're not protecting, and you're not respecting the votes and the opinions and their rights and their freedoms of the other half of the country. You're not doing that. So how can I side with you? And Russia's intervention saying, I think it's being blown way out of proportion, and that's why I don't see a problem with Russia. Russia's saying in Crimea, the actual island, the southeastern island, where majority of the citizens there are Russian, who's protecting them? Look at the volatile reaction, the violence that is erupting from people that are pro-Western. You think that the people voicing and saying we want to be part of Russia, you don't think there's going to be a clash there? I don't blame Russia. A lot of these people are, Russians by blood. They're Russians. They live in Ukraine and they're going to live there. Russia is simply saying we will not allow these people, these people that instigated an unconstitutional coup of the government to harm these people. They're not saying they're going against war. They're not going to march. At no time did Putin say that he's going to be going into Kiev and taking over the country. They're simply saying, you know what, we're going to protect these people because they are Russians. And if I was a Russian in there, I would be scared too. At least someone's willing to respect my views because I don't side with them. Who's looking out for me? You got the United States saying, we'll protect the Ukrainians. Well, obviously, am I included in this? Because I don't agree with this. I don't want this. And I represent almost half of the country, but no one's protecting us. So Russia intervenes and says, we'll protect you. No one's going to overthrow you. No one's going to cause crap here. They're not taking over. They never said that they were taking Ukraine back into the Soviet Union. They're simply saying that we're going to protect the Russians that are on Ukrainian soil. Now think about this for a second. I'm going to give you an example. And it's not going to be completely accurate, obviously. It's hard to come up with analogies. I like analogies because they help you kind of open your eyes a little bit. See, Puerto Rico. I was going to say Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, which is basically, what is it? It's a territory of the United States. It's not necessarily a state. It's not obviously attached because it's not anywhere there. But it's governed by the United States government. They're considered U.S. citizens. But they also have native Puerto Ricans there as well. Like, let's face it, there may be other you know, typical Americans or whatever you want to describe them living there, but they're Americans. What happens if there was a coup there? What happens if Puerto Rico wanted to remove themselves from the United States? They're like, you know what, we don't want to be a territory of the United States. We are our own country. We have a history, and we want to separate. But there's half of the country are still just Americans who live there because it's an amazing place to live. I am so jealous of you living there, by the way. Yes, it's beautiful there. I'm gonna go there someday. But you know, half of them, the Americans are like, whoa, you know what, we don't agree with this, but we represent half of the country. We may not be, you know, native or siding, or maybe we are, and we like this way, but they're gonna overthrow, and in the capital they overthrow the government, but they don't represent the entire country. You think that the United States is not gonna intervene and protect those American citizens, the ones that didn't, you know, become part of the coup? The ones that didn't overthrow it? You damn well be sure there would be warships right outside. There would be the United States on that door protecting those people right away. And sure, there would be so much media coverage, they wouldn't want to cause anything. They're not going in there to disrupt people. And maybe eventually they're like, all right, fine, whatever. We'll give you your country back the way it was many, many hundreds of years ago, whatever. That's fine. But you're not going to harm, in those situations it becomes so violent, you're not going to harm the American citizens that maybe want to return home, or maybe the ones that are there. We're just going to be there to make sure. And I see that as what Russia is doing. Sure, they're, you know, oh, they're violating this and violating that. Oh, bollocks on that. Bollocks on that. These are things that are, people are saying, oh, they're violating it. It's an act of war, and blah, blah, blah. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as them saying, hey, you know what, these people are Russians. They live in the Ukraine and everything like that. This isn't like their rights and everything as an independent state, independent country rather, is fairly recent. You know, not talking about historically, but fairly recent once they were part of the Soviet Union and then they went away. And then Russia has upheld that. I'm not saying they're taking it back. I just think that they're actually going in there to protect these citizens and their rights and their views that no one else seems to give a shit about. Everyone's siding with these other people because they want to be part of our family, our team. They want to be part of the home team, the Western Democratic team. I'm sorry, but those people that threw all the cocktails and burned down the place, I don't want them part of this team, because this team doesn't behave like that. That's not how it is, and that is not democracy. Democracy is about, you know, they're saying, I read, I think it was my brother-in-law, he was like, oh, well, it is democracy, it's all the people. No, democracy is about the voice of all of the people, all of the respective people involved. And those voices, the other half of the voices, were ignored. And everyone is focusing on these people that are pro-Western over a document, over a financial signing of something that half the country probably would have wanted. But these people didn't want it. So there was this overthrowing of the government. Why even have elections? Why would you even want to run for government there? If that's what's going to happen. Should I sign this? Should I not sign this? Why not just do it so that every single decision that you make, you put an election out? Put an election out. And say, okay, this is the whole people. So then that way, no one can say, oh, you're not doing, oh, you know what? Majority of the people in this country want us to sign this. And then if you overthrow it, you know, I mean, but that's such a waste. You vote in someone, you vote them in as your political representatives, as your, you know, elected officials to represent you politically. And they make that decision. You're going to overthrow every single time that happens and erupt in violence like that? I think it's ridiculous. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. I know that they go against a lot of what everyone else thinks and everything like that. And maybe, just maybe what I said, you know, some of you see it that way. And I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that the way I see it. I'm just as ignorant and blinded by all this information and propaganda swirling around the internet and online as you are. So don't think either it's the same thing goes to you, that you have all the knowledge, that your opinion is right. Because probably both of us are in the dark and we're just running around going, oh, I have this opinion here. I just thought I'd share my opinion and that's all. So, this one. It's crazy. I hope that the violence stops. I hope that they get their shit together. Because it's horrible. All they see is people suffering, and this tension is not necessary. And the United States, I'm going to say this too, you shouldn't get involved. This is about, you know what, let Europe take care of this. This is about Europeans and they really wanted them. Let them discuss it with Russia. We don't need more bolstering. We simply don't need someone with bigger guns coming in and making it even more tense. We don't need this turned into a US versus Russia conflict. Stay out of it, United States. For the love of God. Just work on your nation. Get your own shit together, and just leave that alone. I'm not saying leave the people in the Ukraine alone. They started this. They threw the cocktails. There are consequences. Maybe the government can deal with it now. That's their problem and Europe's problem. This is their relationship. You don't need to be the world police in this particular case here. And believe me, no one's going to be thanking you over there, even if you do. That's it. Selfish truth. And remember, for the love of God, when you're reacting to something, don't always think it's almost like think, hey, you know what? Am I being fed this information to react like this? Are these opinions actually mine, or are they constructed based on misinformation? Don't be a sheep. Don't do it.